This is part 5 of the Read 4C Vise Rebuild series. If you haven't seen part 4, click the link at the top of the screen. In this video, we'll finish the handle and polish some parts. Hello everyone, I'm Jeff and welcome to my shop. We got a lot to cover, so let's get to it. So here we are with the small end of the handle exposed through my chuck, and we're going to polish this. We're going to use this process pretty much on all of the stuff that we're going to be polishing in the lathe. So I'm dry sanding this with 80, 120, 180, 220, and then 320. And then we're going to wet sand with 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. And for wet sanding, in between each grit, we're going to clean off the part with that rag. Then we're going to apply the Mother's Mag and aluminum polish, and then we'll buff that off with a ShamWow. Next, we'll flip the handle around and finish off the rest of it. So what I didn't know at the time was that I thought I had tightened down my chuck enough, but apparently my chuck was not completely tightened down on the handle. So it's actually marring up the end of the handle there that's in the chuck. You can see it there. So we're going to need to pull that out and flip it back over and do that other part again after the fact. But we polished the rest of the handle pretty much the same way we did the end. And yes, I could have used a file and gotten all of those nicks out of the handle, but as I said in an earlier video, we're going to keep most of the nicks and used marks of this vise. You know, all we're doing is cleaning up around them, really. So, because I think that adds to the character of the vise. So that's where I'm like, crap, I really messed up that end, but we can fix it. So basically everything we did at the beginning of this video, we did again. That's good enough for government work. So now we've got the end ball, and we're going to dry sand it and wet sand it just like we did the rest of the handle. And then after the wet sanding, we'll apply that Mother's Mag and aluminum polish. And I'm working with the constraints that I have with this metal lathe. The bore hole going through my chuck, I can fit the handle in there, but I can't fit the end ball in there. It's not wide enough. And I definitely can't fit the lead screw for the spindle in there. So I'm having to use that rest that you saw earlier on the other end. So these are the pins that hold the pipe jaw inserts in place. And you'll notice that they are not perfectly straight, but that is not a problem. We actually want them to have a little bit of a bend to them. That way they're hard to go in and they hold those pipe jaw inserts in really well and they won't just fall out. I am trying to straighten a couple of them with a dead blow rubber mallet. But we polish these up with uh, the wet sanding 400, 600, 800, and 1,000. And that's all we're doing with them. We're not removing a whole lot of material. We're not going to dry sand them, and we're not going to polish them with the mag and aluminum polish. We're just hitting them with the wet sanding. And obviously, we do one half of one pin and then flip it over and do the other half. And for all of these parts, once we've pulled them out of the lathe, we wipe them down and then we go ahead and coat them with that super slick stuff and then wipe that off. That protects them. And again, anytime you're wet sanding, just make sure you rinse between each grit. All right, so these are the lock handles for the swivel lock nuts. And as you can see, they are not straight really at all, but that's not a problem. So we are going to dry sand them and wet sand them and then polish them. And we could spend time straightening them, but it really doesn't matter. They're functional the way they are. Although it looks like it's really bent looking at it in the lathe, when it's on the vise, you'll barely even notice the bend. And again, we could have cleaned them up much more with a file, but we're not trying to make everything look brand new. We're just trying to clean everything up. So we've got two of those, and we'll do the same process for both of them. And obviously, we have to do half of them and then flip them over and do the other half. So, stuff like this, if you don't have a metal lathe, if you've got a big enough drill, you could put your drill in a vise and chuck these small parts like the pins and these handles in the chuck and lock the action on your drill and clean them up that way. I just happen to have a lathe, so this is what I use it for. Well, one of the reasons I use, or one of the things that I do with the lathe. All right, so these are the lock nuts for the swivel lock, and we're going to dry sand them, wet sand them, and then polish them with the mag and aluminum polish. And what I've got them on is just a piece of aluminum bar that I wrapped on the end there with electrical tape and then kind of threaded each one of these lock nuts onto the electrical tape. And that worked out pretty good. And they polished up fairly well. Obviously, we have two of them, so we'll do that process twice. There we go. So next we have the other end ball, and we just need to face it. I've already aligned it in the chuck, made sure, I think we were about 3 thousandths out, so not a huge amount. And after we faced it, then we went ahead and center drilled it. And then we're going to use a variety of drill bits to get it opened up to that 27/64, which is what we need for the tap. And after we got that drilled, we're going to go ahead and chamfer that opening now rather than later. And then we're going to go ahead and tap that hole with the 1/2 inch by 13 thread. And then this is the grade 5 bolt that I have, and I'm using some permanent Loctite, high strength. Tighten that sucker down in there. Let that set up. Then we're going to cut that head off. And it looks like I'm slicing my finger off here, but I'm not. It's never in line with the blade. Then we're going to clean up the end of that. Now I end up cutting this down a little bit more later on, but the cleanup on it is still the same. And then we'll go ahead and thread it. Oh, we got a little bit of a burr there. Thread it into the handle. Make sure that it fits nice. Like a glove. Like O.J. Simpson in a courtroom. All right, so now we're going to polish that. So we're going to dry sand it and wet sand it, and then use the Mother's Mag and aluminum polish just like we did on the rest of the handle. There's the aluminum polish. And we are good to hook. So go ahead and spin that back off. So we could Loctite the other end of this, but I want to make it removable so that it can be removed if Jordan wants to. So we're not going to Loctite it. And we are going to coat all of this with that super slick stuff. There's the handle. So here we have the spindle. We're only going to be polishing the end here, the hockey puck. We are going to dry sand, wet sand, and polish with the mag and aluminum polish. And this is another sort of screw up on my part where I had the lathe spinning in the wrong direction initially. So it kept unthreading and working its way towards the camera. And I was like, why the hell is it doing this? I've got it tightened down in the chuck really hard. And yeah, I eventually figured it out, put it on the opposite rotation, and everything worked out fine. And again, we could have cleaned it up more with a file, but didn't want to remove all that. We wanted it to keep that character. So here we are reassembling the handles for the swivel locks. And the easiest way to do this is just to beat that end with a hammer. I don't have any fancy equipment to be able to do this with. So I'm literally just having to hit it with a hammer. But that did what we needed it to do. Next, we're going to polish the ends of the jaws. So we need to install the jaws or the jaw inserts. And we'll lay that on its side. We're just going to hit it with a Scotch-Brite wheel on the angle grinder. This is another one of those areas that we could have really cleaned up with a file, but we didn't because we wanted to keep all of that dinging and abuse that the Vise had. So they clean up pretty good though. Same on the other side. Then we'll pull that jaw insert back out. Then we'll do the same thing to the static jaw. Now, if you are going to try to clean yours up, just keep in mind that the cast iron is going to, uh, you're going to be able to remove the cast iron and smooth it out easier than you will those hardened jaw inserts. So doing it with a file, just keep that in mind that the cast iron areas are going to kind of melt away as you hit it with the file, and the jaw insert is not going to move a whole lot. So perhaps do it with a palm sander or something along those lines rather than a file. But it's up to you. Then we'll remove that jaw insert. And next, we're going to go ahead and paint that embossed lettering. So these are some enamel paint pens. You can pick them up at just about all your hobby stores. And of course, I'm using black to keep with the other paint that we've already applied. It's probably a good idea to go ahead and wipe the lettering down with a cotton ball and some acetone or uh, even isopropyl alcohol would do, to make sure there's no grease or oil on any of that stuff before you try to apply the paint. If you mess up any of these areas, like I messed up the M in made, you can go ahead and use some acetone to clean that up and then repaint it. Some Q-tips. And we will let that sit for 24 hours before we apply anything else to it. Let that paint set up and dry nice and cured. And that is going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. And as always, I appreciate the support. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section. I get to them as fast as I can. In the next video, we will finish up this build. So as always, I will see you next time.